we always want more leaders. Well, the question I have, and one thing I've learned at West Point, one of what reasons West Point's the premier leadership academy in the world, is it gives you real life experiences actually leading. So the question I have to coaches is, what situations are you putting your players in front of the team to actually lead?
Welcome to the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast, where we believe coaches are some of the most important teachers and leaders in the world, and they deserve to be supported. I'm your host, Luke Gromer, and every week we're bringing you conversations with coaches, experts, and leaders from across sports that will help you get better at teaching and leading so that you can develop high-performing teams and high-character people. Coaches, welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Coach Ben Wilkins. Coach Wilkins is the associate head coach for the Army men's basketball program at West Point. He has nearly 20 years of college basketball coaching experience. You can hear a little bit more about Ben in the introduction to last week's episode. In part 2 of this conversation, we talk about how to hold effective exit interviews, what culture really is and how to influence it, Army men's basketball's leadership development curriculum, and effective reflection. If you enjoyed the episode and want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, just go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes from this episode or any episode of the podcast. And Coach Wilkins is such a generous guy that he offered up more of his time to present on some more in-depth topics around leadership development and what they do at Army, and answer some of your questions. The session is called How Army Men's Basketball Develops Leaders, and you can too. It's taking place Thursday, April 7th at 1 p.m. Central Time on Zoom. If you can't attend live, you'll get access to the entire replay. The cost is $10, and after the Zoom, if you're not satisfied with the value you received, we'll refund your money, no questions asked. To register for the Coaching Zoom with Coach Wilkins, go click on the link in the show details. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about what we offer coaches and organizations, go to cuttingedgecoach.com or just send me an email at luke@cuttingedgecoach.com. Now to part 2 of my conversation with Coach Ben Wilkins. Enjoy the episode. In our previous conversation before this podcast, you talked about exit interviews, and it's something you are really passionate about and think there's a lot of value in conducting good exit interviews. And so just kind of continuing on this topic of meeting with players, I'd love for you to share what you found to be really effective in exit interviews.
Yeah. First, I think language is important, Luke, and I hope you don't take offense for it. I just call it a conversation. I definitely don't think it's an interview because I hate interviews. So it's just a conversation I have with the guys, and it's one of my favorite things I do. And I've been doing this now for a while, and I've gained more information about our players, things that we can do better as a staff, things we can do better as a program, our culture of our program by having these conversations. And really, it's this simple as I'll just sit down with the seniors and just say, hey, I'd love to talk about your experience here at West Point. Let's sit down, let's talk. And I give them a couple really open-ended questions. My biggest thing with it, Luke, is I want it to be a free-flowing conversation. I don't want to steer it to a certain way. I want each one to flow how it's going to flow because there really isn't an agenda. I just want to learn more about our program, more about how I can become a better coach and how our coaching staff can become better. So then I'll just sit down and we have conversations. And I've had at West Point. I mean, I had a 3-hour one last year that only got stopped because we had something else that we had to do. But we'll just go of simply as tell me about your time here. And that way, that's such an open-ended question. I mean, someone might go full like academic, socially, sometimes might go basketball. And then the big thing is, what's my North Star of those conversations is I want to grow. And I also want to have a good litmus test of where is our culture behind the scenes, because our real culture is in peer-to-peer interactions with our players in the locker room when coaches aren't there. That's the true culture of the team. So I want to find out what that is. And I've learned some good stuff. And I ask the simple questions of, hey, what can we do better as a program? What do you think our strengths are? How would you describe our culture? Each one's a little bit different. I think for someone that does this and I started with, I should have said this, Luke, to begin with. I tell the person, our relationship's different now. This isn't coach to player. This is peer to peer. Like we're in each other's lives. This is a whole different deal. So I tell them that I want you to be open, and I never judge. I never get emotional. If they say something that's not bad, I make sure I thank them. So if they say, Coach, I don't like when you do X, thanks for saying that. I know that's not hard. I want them to tell the truth. I think that's huge with that. And I've learned simple things like when we were married, we had 5 picture frames in our locker room. We had 2 seniors and 3 really good juniors coming back. So we just put individual pictures up of those guys. You don't think anything of as a coaches. One of our players said, Coach, we came in and we had a bad culture that year. And he said, Coach, we came in and it felt like, well, the stars are already picked. So it was like we kind of separated our team into individuals. And now the next year we took advice. Now, believe me, there's a lot more reasons to this, but we had all team pictures in our locker room. We won 20 games, went to CA championship game, one of the best teams in William & Mary history. But I would have never known what an effect just putting a team picture over an individual picture in the locker room had to have with our guys. Simple things like I watch film on the bus with our guys at Army. And so obviously I watch with the guys that played. If the guys didn't play, they don't have game film to watch. Well, I never thought about it. And one of the guys said, hey, Coach, sometimes it sucks because it's just another reminder I'm not playing because you're talking to 8, 9 guys on the bus and there's a couple guys I'm not talking to. And I'm like, you feel at the time, you feel really dumb, Luke. Like that's an opportunity. So what do I have a rule to myself now is every time I go to the Buck, I'm going to take one time. I'm going to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes to one of those players that's not playing and just have one of those conversations. And I've learned a lot of good things. And I'm gonna go along with Luke. I'm gonna give one unbelievable story I heard, and this is the power of West Point that I've learned. Is we had a really hard film session. So we had a senior captain, Jordan Fox, that wasn't playing he wasn't making the toughness plays that he needed to make. So we had a film session. I had the clicker, so it was my job. We said, staff, we're gonna get on Jordan. He's got to be tougher. So I show about 4 or 5 clips, and I get on him pretty hard. He's got to be tougher, and get him on pretty good. He has a great practice. He's flying around. He's being tough. He's doing all the things we need. And we know as coaches, I said earlier, like those hard conversations, tell the truth, it's still not easy. It doesn't matter how many times you do it. It's not easy. And I remember this to the day, this was, would have been 3 years ago. I'm standing by the door and one of our other seniors comes over and teaches me an unbelievable leadership lesson. Again, we're at the #1 leadership academy in the world. We can't forget our guys are getting the elite leadership. So they're viewing us too as coaches. Our players are always judging us. And Kate Edwards, one of our seniors, he comes over to us, Luke, and Luke comes over to me and says, hey, Coach, you got on Jordan really hard today. He had a great practice. You need to tell him that. Not you should tell him. It was you need to tell him that. And you know what? He was right, Luke. And I told Jordan, it was a 20-second conversation. And these conversations, sometimes the shorter ones can be more powerful. I said, Jordan, you were awesome today. You're flying around. You do. So I don't think anything of it. Then we're having our exit interview. And Jordan says, hey, Coach, I appreciate, he brings it up. I appreciate you getting on me that day. I needed that, Coach. That was good for me. I finished the year the right way. I appreciate that. But he said the best part was you took me after practice and told me that, and I knew we were still on the same team. I knew it wasn't personal. And then I had to fill him in. I said, Jordan, I appreciate you saying it, but I want you to tell you that was Kane Edwards. That was one of your senior leaders, teaching me a life lesson. And I think that was something that was really cool that I wouldn't have known how Jordan took that without that senior exit interview, because I think sometimes it's hard to, as coaches, we say stuff, but how does it really resonate with our players? Those give me a look under the hood of how players are they feel to be coached by me and our staff and things we can do. And there's a lot of things I've learned through those exit interviews. But I would just say, and the biggest thing, just have a conversation, Luke, and do it. And then I always end it with this: is I'm always here for you. As a player, and if you haven't talked to me in 5 years and you need help, if you need if you need me for a recommendation, don't feel like, hey, you haven't talked to me in 5 years, man. This is a lifelong bond, and I make sure they understand that. But I love those. Those are my favorite times. And again, you got to do them in different spots. And I'm smiling right now, Luke, because I'm thinking about our 5 seniors last year and the where we were and the things we talked about, and that's what coaching's about. The neat thing is I've been here working on 6 years, so I spent the 4 years with these guys, and I've seen them grow and mature. Sorry for being long, man, but I love those. I love those exit interviews.
That's fantastic. There's so much good stuff in there.
first, thanks for sharing that story. And what a cool story. So many dynamics in play there, not only, you delivering the hard feedback, but him responding, another player giving you a reminder and leading effectively, and then him recognizing it back in that, that exit conversation, that wrap up conversation. And I love what you shared too. It's important that with that conversation, you establish that, our relationship is different now. You're finished playing here. This is peer-to-peer. I want your honest feedback. I think that's huge. And the other part that just stands out to me is, like you said, that those conversations will inevitably be full of some hard things to hear. And we want our players to receive the hard things we tell them and act on them. Like, we need to do the same. That's this key, right? Of again, back to modeling, doing it in these conversations where we get some hard feedback. Like you said, with the picture example, I think that's another great example. Something you guys even weren't aware of. And I'm sure that when you heard that feedback, it was like, oh, gut punch, man, like, how did I not see this? But the next year it's different. That's what it's about too in our coaching, is that we find a way to get that honest, hard feedback from players. And then we use it. And not all of it. I'm sure that there's been feedback that you guys like, they lack some context here. This isn't necessarily something that is doable. They don't understand this piece. But there's always going to be, I think, some nuggets that we can take away and apply in our coaching, like I said, just so that we continue to grow and evolve like we want them to. I'd also love to just have you share a little bit more about something you said in there. You talked about culture, and that really your culture is the peer-to-peer interaction that happens when coaches aren't around. I think that's important to remember. That's challenging to me personally, and just in my coaching, to consider that. So I'd love for you to share more about that, your thoughts on that, and then maybe also, how do we get a barometer on that? How do we know what it's really like when we're not around?
Yeah. Awesome question. And first, I think, how do we make sure that we're influencing that? I think that I love the term culture warriors. So I think as a staff, you got to make sure that, okay, who are our handful of players that we know that we're aligned with, and that we got to make sure that we're spending enough intentional time with them for them to understand our culture, for them to be able to grow as leaders, so that they're having the correct conversations in the locker room. Because sometimes if players don't understand the why on why we're doing certain things, Luke, that they might question it. Because I'll tell you, there's no one in the world that questions things more than me. That why really helps. So I understand the power of why. If we can have those culture warriors, and they can come to us and say, hey, coach, why do we do this? And then you can explain that there's a rational reason, and they say, oh, that makes sense, coach, I got it. And now when they're in the locker room and that why comes up, instead of being complaining, then everybody's on the same page. So I think it starts with making sure that we are intentional with those culture warriors. And then it's not an easy thing to do, Luke. I think the biggest part of any culture, now your situation, and I know probably a lot of people listen, is different than ours. We get to choose our players. I think the selection is the number one thing with culture, is bring in good people that fit your culture, and then it's a lot easier. And if you have people that aren't strong for your culture, you have a hard decision. And it's how important is our culture compared to how important is this player? And it's a great question. It's a tough question, and I think it's spending intentional time. And for us, leaders lead. I mean, I use that phrase all the time to our guys. So I mean, simple things. And I know this is our culture, but a little bit of is anytime you can catch someone doing something really strong for your culture, you didn't make sure that it's praised. And that could be simple as, hey, somebody was struggling and someone went and helped him, because everybody wants to be praised. So if you can find more ways to praise people, you'll get a stronger culture. And our guys here, the culture's really evolved. Now we have a different level, kid. I'll be first to admit that. But they do so many things behind the scenes. And I'll give you an example of an exit interview is after we go through a 6-week basic training at West Point. And our seniors go around when the freshmen come back to the dorm and they spend 5 to 10 minutes just talking to them, making sure they understand it'll be okay. No one's ever told them to do that. And they just do it. And I didn't know it until I was but you know why they do it, Luke? Because they then understood how awesome and powerful it was when a senior did it. So I think some of it is spending some time with those culture warriors and starting to get a little bit of traditions. Because if you can build traditions, and then I was a person in their shoes once and I felt how powerful it is, it's easier for them to do it to someone else. I was I think the last thing is help coach them, right, Luke? Like, we are adults. So if we want a certain culture so if someone's not leading, start really small and say, hey, Johnny, you're not leading like we need to. Let's sit there. There's a practice right now. Let's pick one player, and I want you to give 2 praises to this player during practice. Find 2 things. And then after practice, bring Johnny and say, hey, Johnny, how did it go? What were the 2 things you said? What were you thinking? And then stack it, build it up like that. So I don't even know if I'm fully answering that question, Luke, because that's a great question. But it's definitely your peer-to-peer. And I think culture isn't one thing. It's a million things. And it's just continuing to understand, ABC, always build culture. And I think that every decision we make as coaches is either instilling the culture or you're chipping away a little bit. And we just got to remember that it's not easy and it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. And I love what you shared at the end there, that culture is really a million little interactions that compound on each other. And I think what you shared as well about it's important that we find those culture warriors, like you said it, or right, who are the leaders that we need to influence to, like you said, have the conversations in the way that we hope they have when we're not around. The people that we need to explain the why to, that can keep that culture going in the direction we want it to, when inevitably there will be people that push against it. I want to follow up, though, on what you talked about with traditions. I love that story of the seniors that go back and just check in on those freshmen as they're going through their basic training weeks. Are there any other powerful traditions or things that you guys do in your basketball program that really encapsulate your culture, or other stories like that, maybe that coaches could take ideas from and apply to their team?
Yeah, good question. I'm gonna come back to the leadership development curriculum that we do, Luke, and I think it's powerful. Is we take one senior and they get with somebody at West Point. We're lucky to have elite people, but it could be an assistant coach. It could be if you were a youth team, it could be a parent, and they put together a lesson plan of an area in our culture. And why it's so powerful is we now have our seniors in front of our team, and they're delivering a speech, a talk on adversity, and they're now peer to peer with an officer in the Army, and they're getting time away from basketball talking about this. And I think it's powerful for a lot of things. And we make sure a couple of things, we give them obviously a very small guideline. Hey, here's some phrases that you need to hit that are reminders to them. And why I think it's so important is the teacher is the learner, right, Luke? You know that in your background. So as our seniors are teaching a lesson on adversity, it'll be a lot easier later in the year when we're facing adversity that they taught that lesson themselves. And then there's also a piece of our younger guys are seeing our seniors in a different light, that, wow, the coaches trust them enough to get in front of the team and speak for an hour on a certain topic. And each year it'll be slightly different, but we keep it the same because unless you have a much better memory than me, lessons can be lost. So we like to have where it's repetitive. So I think that's a powerful tradition that everybody could use. And I think that's the piece of, we always want more leaders. Well, the question I have, and one thing I've learned at West Point, one of what reasons West Point's the premier leadership academy in the world, is it gives you real life experiences actually leading. So the question I have to coaches is, what situations are you putting your players in front of the team to actually lead? And then the same thing, I'm giving them feedback. Like once that lesson's over, I'm sitting right away. They called it action AAR here, action after action review, and I'm right away. We're doing an AAR. Hey Aaron, what went well? What didn't do well? What will you do next time? And the neat thing is, again, in the exit interviews, our seniors say, Coach, that's one of the coolest things ever. I can't believe I sat in front of our team for an hour and they talked. and they gain confidence. And you know what? They're going to have to public speak sometime in their life. They're going to give an interview. We've helped them grow as young men as well, help our culture. So that's just one thing that I think as traditions that is terrific. That people could apply. And that could be a 15-minute talk. It doesn't have to be an hour, but just getting our players in front of your peers and talking and teaching is so powerful for so many reasons.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought it up, because I'd love to just hear a little bit more about how you guys do it in your program, because I know it is such a focus of military training, those AARs, those after action reviews that you just mentioned. Would you just briefly kind of explain what those are again, and what does that look like in your coaching?
After action reviews, great lesson. I've learned so many things at West Point, and we don't spend enough time as leaders reflecting, and we don't have enough time thinking. So basically an after action review is simply, hey, what was the mission? What were we trying to accomplish here? Did we attain our goal or not? And then simply, hey, if we do this again, what lessons did we learn? So what went well, what didn't went well, what did not go well, and then what will we improve the next time? And so simply in coaching, like I'll just use a personal example. I'm the defensive coordinator. So all preseason, I have each week built in, hey, what drills did we do? And then I have an AAR each week. And, hey, what went well this week? What didn't go well? What is my concerns moving forward? And it's a good refresher, Luke, because I can go back and all of a sudden I'm worried about us guarding the basketball. And I say, man, you know what? The last 2 years I've been worried about guarding the basketball at the same time. Don't panic. And it reminds me of some lessons that, hey, now when I'm building the next preseason, hey, I had a couple notes. Hey, don't forget we skipped this step. But I forgot if I didn't have it on a piece of paper. And the same thing, we do that as a staff. We do that with recruiting, every aspect of our. And if you say you don't have time to reflect, you don't have time to learn, you don't have time to grow. And we've talked about growing several times in this conversation, Luke. And that's the big piece is a staff, you get a chance to grow, to learn. And it's not a finger pointing. It's how can we get better? So we do that as a staff all the time. And simple things is, hey, it could be, hey, we did a field trip. Hey, quick AAR, it's 5 minutes. Hey, boom. Next time we need to bring the speakers. Hey, next time we forgot batteries. Like just little things that like, how can we get better? And life's always about how can we get better? And I think that AAR is something that I'll carry for me the rest of my life.
I love that. I think that those are really powerful. And like you said, they're not long, but it is just slowing down, pausing, thinking about it. I think what you said there too is so critical. Like write it down because we forget so much. I've got one more question for you, and then just a few rapid fire questions before I get you out of here. You started talking about how some of the unique parts of West Point and just the culture of excellence that is in existence there already. I'd love to know just a little bit more about that and how that plays itself out in your coaching and the team's culture. How are you and the other coaches intentional about bringing that culture of excellence to life in your team and your basketball team?
I think the biggest thing with the excellent piece, Luke, is to cherish every moment, attack every moment, and to iron sharpens iron. I know it's a maybe overused cliche, but I think it's something that we really do a good job as a program of our guys of really pushing their limits, and so excellence. And a lot of it is can't be achieved at West Point because the bar is set so high, but you're striving to get to that bar. And the neat thing is you're in an environment, Luke, where other people are striving to. And I think that's what's so special here is that the person to your left and the person to your right, they're striving for excellence too. So it's it's easier for guys to maybe push themselves because that guy to the left and that guy to the right's pushing himself. So I don't know if there's a specific like area to say, hey, this is how excellence carries over. But I, you know what, maybe this is how it is, Luke. If we win or lose a game, the next day in practice, no team would know if we won or lost because it comes back to what I said, like they're going to attack whatever's in front of them. It's Tuesday's practice. We just beat somebody. We just lost somebody. Our guys are resilient because excellence, like, you need to bring it every day, and it's just like that's what you got to do. And there's no shortcuts. And our guys, definitely with West Point, it's hard here, right? Life, if you want to achieve something special in life, it's got to be hard. And our guys, they don't blink, they don't flinch. They're very resilient, and I think it's a lot because of the excellence of West Point, and that's why they grow so much. And it really starts a little bit here, Luke, is that you hit your first obstacle. We talk about basic training. Our guys don't think they can do it. All of a sudden they do it. You know what? They get a little stronger. And then they get the next obstacle. I can't do this at all. They can do it. And they get a little stronger. And that's what West Point keeps doing. It keeps stacking it. And that's why, no school in the world has graduated more CEOs per student than West Point, because of those experiences, and you grow through it. So that's where it's like stacking it. But I'm in awe of our guys sometimes, Luke, to be honest, just how mentally tough they are. And I'm very fortunate to get a chance to mentor and coach these young men.
I love what you shared there, that you wouldn't know what the result of the previous night's game had been when you come to our practice. I think that's a fantastic target to be shooting for with our culture and our team and our practices, and for us as coaches too. Like, hopefully people couldn't really tell if we had won or lost the night before based on our coaching either. I think that's something that we should keep at the forefront of our mind. Coach Wilkins, this has been fantastic. I've got 3 quick rapid fire questions for you. I just want to know the first things that come to your mind before I get you out of here. And the first one is this: the most fun part of coaching is
the time with the guys, the one-on-ones, the bus trips, the road trips, the talks, the laughing. That's the best part by far.
I love it. Here's the next one. I wish I would have known blank before my first coaching experience.
It's fundamentals. Everything's a fundamentals, and that's on the court. It's not some trick play we see on Twitter. It's fundamentals, and the same with life. It's about showing up, doing the work. There's no trick to the trade. Learn the trade.
That's good. And the last one, I know I'm successful as a coach when
I talked to a kid I coached at Barton College, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago, a couple months ago, and he gave me something that meant the world to me, Luke. He said, "Coach, I would do anything to play for you again." And he goes, "I would love to get in the lines and do that." And why that was powerful is I knew that he enjoyed our time we had together, but then I was also talking to him 16 years in the future from when he played, and talking about life and kids and way more important things. So that right there, that story, that's when you're a success. And I don't know if I'm a success or not. I think I'll know more when I get a lot older. But I that's the key right there. The players really enjoy playing for you, and then are you having real serious talks as you're coaching them, but way down the road.
Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode, and a huge thanks to Coach Wilkins for joining me. As always, if you enjoyed the episode and you want to grab a copy of the podcast notes, go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast, or just click the link in the show details. And don't forget to sign up for the Coaching Zoom with Coach Wilkins on April 7th at 1 p.m. Central Time. Go click the link in the show details to sign up. We'll be talking about how Army men's basketball develops leaders, and you can too. I've got 2 takeaways from this episode. Number 1, a quote from Coach Wilkins on culture. He said, "Our real culture is in the peer-to-peer interactions with our players in the locker room when coaches aren't there. That's the true culture of the team." I think we all recognize the importance of culture and are likely doing some intentional things to try to build culture. But I don't think we spend enough time as coaches, myself included, considering how we can shape the peer-to-peer interactions on our team. And it's so important that we do. Because like Ben said, that's really what our culture is. And number 2 is the activity Ben shared that they have their seniors in the program do. He talked about it in that section, but we won't develop leaders unless we give the players opportunities to lead. What a practical way to do that. Have your athletes give a presentation on an aspect of your culture to their peers. Developing leaders takes time, effort, and intentionality. It doesn't just happen. And like I've mentioned, if you want to learn more about how Army men's basketball develops leaders, and you can too, don't forget to sign up for the Coaching Zoom with Coach Wilkins on April 7th. Just head to the show details and click the link to sign up and register. The cost is $10, and if you're not satisfied with the value you receive, after the Zoom, we'll refund you, no questions asked. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and I hope to see you on the Coaching Zoom.